Movie Wars.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to a very special edition of the Movie Wars podcast. I have a very special guest with me today. He took time out of his busy day directing plays and doing all the things he's doing. Mr. Wolfgang Bodison, ladies and gentlemen. How you doing, sir?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
So glad you're here. It's kind of, it's so funny how we cross paths because like I mentioned on our preparation for the discussion, we've talked about, A Few Good Men a few times on the podcast, and I've posted content from our excerpt from the podcast. And each time I've done it, the reaction, the love for the role, people's memory of that role, your story of how it happened, and it just always elicits a huge response. And obviously you've been doing so much work since then. We're going to get into that, but I thought it would be such a treat for our fans and listeners who love that story to hear it directly from you. Not just the story of how it happened, but what you were doing beforehand, the emotions, the experience, and the impact that it's had.
Sure. I mean, it's funny because the story has kind of taken on a life of its own. I mean, I was Rob Reiner's gardener to his, masseuse to all kinds of crazy, starting at that company, I started in the mailroom at Castle Rock and came to LA to write and direct out of University of Virginia. And, the opportunity at Castle Rock was a huge opportunity and, hustled, doing all those kind of jobs out of the mailroom and slowly started to work my way up the production ladder because, again, my intention and my dream was to more write and direct. And so being around those creatives there and seeing the business was pretty extraordinary. And then, did some PA work on some of their TV shows. And then a big opportunity was to be Rob Reiner's assistant on the movie Misery with James Caan and Kathy Bates, and especially somebody who wants to direct. I got the chance to watch, Rob Reiner and Barry Sonnenfeld, who was a DP, collaborate and set up the shots, and watching Rob talk with Kathy Bates and, Jimmy Caan with his directing. So, I mean, I just filled out journal after journal after journal of notes of, it's basically my kind of, education in a way, school education, just watching him work. And after that, I continued and I was a car, what was it called? The car supervisor, I guess, something on Boys in the Hood, and then came back to Castle Rock and started to, location manage and did a couple jobs working up the ranks as an assistant, and then got the opportunity to be the location manager on A Few Good Men when that came about, which in itself was like a crazy opportunity. My first job as the lead location manager on a A-list movie with all these stars. So, I mean, I was running around like, a madman trying to get that job done. And I was at the company and bumped into Rob, and we started talking. And, he's talking about the job and the locations and stuff. And then out of the blue, he literally looks at me and goes, I know you want to write and direct, but have you ever acted before? I was like, no. He goes, the role of Dawson. Yeah, I said, yeah, of course. And he goes, well, just bear with me. Why don't you come in and read for it and see how you do? And I mean, I didn't think much of it at the moment. I thought enough of it to get an acting coach once the appointment was set up to help me with the audition, and prepared for it. Came in, and the funny moment was, in the lobby, the casting director comes, and they're like, "Do you have a headshot and resume?" I'm like, "No." And she smiled because she knew the situation. And so I go in and I read, and I guess it went okay. I don't know. at that time, I didn't know what a good audition was. And, of course, for me, I leave the room and I'm back out hustling, trying to find locations for this movie. And then they called me back a couple of times. And then after the last callback, I remember at the end of the audition, Rob stood up and he goes, well, I have a big decision to make. And I'm thinking, yeah, you probably do, man. You got, there were all these names that were out in the lobby, waiting to come in. And I'm thinking, yeah, man, there's some good actors out there. That's going to be a hard decision. and I'm like off again, running to find some locations that I'm stressed about. And a few days later, I get a page, I'm dating myself, from his office. And his assistant gets on. Just hold up a second. She sounded excited. And I'm like, oh. And Rob gets on and he says, well, welcome to the movie business. I'm going to offer you the role as Dawson in A Few Good Men, which,
wow.
And I know the phone in the building where I was making that call from, of course, the building's there, but the payphone isn't there anymore. That's not a thing anymore. But it was across from the Beverly Center on Beverly Boulevard. And, that's where kind of a crossroads began. And the funny thing is I immediately went into the head of production at Castle Rock. And I said, look, Rob offered me the job as Dawson in A Few Good Men. He goes, yeah, I know. Congratulations. I said, thank you. But do you think I can continue to do the job as the location manager as well? And he laughed and he was like, look, I think you should probably focus on the one job as the acting in this film. And so he was right. And then, I worked with the coach and worked on the role. And it came time for the table reading for the film. And it's in Culver City and a big, one of those studio sets. And we got the tables all in a big circle, and I'm early, like 30 minutes. And in walks, Kiefer Sutherland, Kevin Bacon, Kevin Pollak, Demi Moore, Tom Cruise, and then, of course, Jack Nicholson. And I'm like, what the hell am I doing here?
Wow.
What in the world is happening? And we start reading, and, they're all fantastic. Just reading off the page, not trying to deliver any performances. But, man, I'm ready. I'm like, and I'm looking down, and suddenly, like, some water drips on my page, and I'm like, there's a leak in the building. But no, there's sweat dripping off my forehead.
Oh my gosh.
And the whole time I've got my thumb, on the page where I'm supposed to speak first, and it's getting closer and it's getting closer. And finally it's my turn to speak. And I think I just vomited, just like, I just exploded with my line, just one line, and everybody laughed because they understood. And it was, I tell you, from that day I realized, well, looking back, I really appreciate the support that I got from everybody in the cast, particularly Tom Cruise, who, look, they all kind of knew the story and they all could have took a stance of like, who is this guy, but Tom was like, hey, whatever you need, more than happy to, spend time. If we want to go over lines, if you want some advice, please don't hesitate to come talk to me. And so that really helped to settle me. And, from there, working with, doing the shoot and everything, at the time, Oh, I understood because I'd been on, sets before, especially on, like Misery. Um, I understood sort of the magnitude of really the level of work that was happening. I just didn't understand me being a part of it and contributing to it. And then when the movie came out and it kind of doing as well as it did, it was kind of it's been a roller. It to this day, it's been still a roller coaster ride because on many levels, as an actor, I always say it's a great problem to have, but I don't suggest people start there.
At volume 11.
Yeah. Because after that, going in and auditioning, once I made the decision to continue, rightly and wrongly, there were expectations. Rightly and wrongly, people either were supportive or not. And I understand I kind of cut the line a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I did the best I could from somebody who was really now trying to play catch up. And so it's been a great experience. I've worked on a lot of great projects with a lot of great people. Probably didn't rise to the occasion on a lot of things just because of that inexperience. But, I've come to really just sort of, give myself hey man, this has been, not many people have this story, and I'm proud of where I am right now and the work that I'm doing. And, the journey isn't over and I'm excited about the future.
Yeah. What's interesting, I mean, you say cutting in line, but you talk about your experience before that. I mean, being part of the films that you were, regardless of what role you were in, you were being exposed to high level filmmaking, though, with Boys in the Hood, especially, and Misery. I mean, sure. Both of those films insanely impactful, especially Boys in the Hood. I mean, it's not like you were a part of low level. You were getting an education, whether you knew it or not. I mean, at the time.
Oh man, my education on Boys in the Hood. I was a picture car coordinator. So if you remember the movie, there were all those car clubs. Okay. And my job was to go down into the communities and to touch base with them and recruit them. And it was quite an experience because some of those cultures were kind of hard. And it was a lot of fun. And I think back and I think how naive I was at the time, walking into places I probably shouldn't have walked into with cameras hanging off of my back, but actually was well received and they were excited about the movie. But then even understanding some of the culture down at the time, which it still exists between the Bloods and the Crips and things, and how some of them were perceiving how the movie was portraying certain sides and stuff, and kind of finding myself in the middle of that at times. And it was a lot of fun. And like you said, the movie had a huge impact. And John Singleton, unfortunately, who has passed away, it was a launching point for him. So I was very lucky to be able to work on that.
Yeah. Going back to that table read, so that part sticks out to me too, because another part of my research, I did so much research for that because it's a movie that warrants that, right? Like you really have to bring it when you're going to cover that movie. You talked about that table read. What I read was so take your experience, coming into this. I heard Jack Nicholson brought just an interesting, just walking into the room, brought this level of intensity to that table read. So going back to your shoes where you're sitting, having just been put in this role, is that true? When he did the read, was it like, whoa, we're in business right now?
I always like to, all the stars that were involved, they come into the room and then Tom Cruise comes and there's that buzz that happens. But then there was before Jack walked in, it was like the calm, it was something's about to happen. Right. And he comes in And yes, he not only brought that level of intensity to the table read, but also to the days that he filmed and he worked. And not only intensity, but in professionalism, you know? And yes, he had it in his contract. He had to leave by a certain time to go watch the Lakers. That he had the clout to do that.
Absolutely.
But when he was there, and this was across the board with all those stars, there could have been a level of diva-ness that would have upended a lot of things. But everybody brought their A game, including him. And, you know, when we did that scene in the courtroom where he did his monologue, the iconic monologue, of course, he did it like he did it on camera. But he also did it like that for everybody as we covered the room, you know, which is not unheard of, but, you know, not always expected, especially from big names. A lot of times, they don't even do it. You got someone like, you know, the script supervisor doing, you know, saying the lines. But he not only did it, he delivered it as he did when he did the role. So we could all work off the same performance when it was our time on camera. So, I mean, that was pretty amazing. And, you know, for myself, being the first time really as an actor, seeing that level of professionalism, we always joke, it kind of messed me up because it's like, that doesn't always exist, you know. But to see those guys from, you know, Tom and Demi and Kevin Pollak and Kevin Bacon, Tom Cruise and Kiefer Sutherland, all of them bringing that level of professionalism was something that I used as my standard moving forward, regardless of the movies I work on, which I'm grateful for.
That's fantastic. Thanks for retelling that story in your own words.
Sure.
It's so cool to hear it from you.
Absolutely.
And after that, so then, you know, you get into Little Big League, The Expert. I mean, you keep doing things. So you said there was an expectation coming out of this film, but you kept getting work, you kept getting hired. So what was that like for you after? Was it a constant kind of state of, you know, that continual education? You're getting in there and doing the auditions, or did you find that the roles were kind of filling up and your agent was calling you on a regular basis? Kind of how did that play out?
Well, I mean, I was that kid. You know, who's this kid who did this job on A Few Good Men? And, you know, I was studying and again, playing catch up, not only in the craft of acting, but living the life as an actor, which is just as important. And I mean, you know, like I said, doing The Expert, Little Big League, Highlander, all of these jobs that, I mean, there were times I was in rooms with directors, rightly or wrongly, maybe I shouldn't have been in the room with, you know, considering my level of experience. You know what I'm saying? And I get it. And I, you know, really, and the crazy thing was, on the movie, A Few Good Men, you know, I had nothing to lose, quite honestly. And I had no concept of acting. And I was fortunate to be working with a director who was very good at communicating with the actors. And so I was in a great position to deliver a performance that was truthful out of myself, okay? And that's, I mean, Rob has talked about kind of why I got the job, because he got to know me on Misery. And he said that there were a lot of qualities from Dawson that were inherently in me. And he had confidence in his own directing abilities to kind of pull that out of me. Okay. And I had no preconceived ideas about acting that would get in that way. After that, there was a lot of fear involved. And because now with the expectations, I'm worried about living up to that. And then so what tended to happen, I started to get in my own way in terms of acting. I would kind of, instead of just being truthful out of myself, I started to do performances that I thought needed to be delivered. Okay. And, that's at times did well and a lot of times did not do well. And, coming full circle in my journey, now as an acting teacher and director, and really can come to grips to, wow, seeing what I was kind of really, trying to compensate for in that moment, not only helps me to kind of, forgive or understand where I was in that experience, but also work with actors now and understand, really what they might be going through and how to help them to really just allow them to work from themselves, from a place of honesty, and not from a place of performance. And so it's kind of taken me having to go through that experience to really be able to have the language and have the vocabulary to communicate that with actors, in the directing and the teaching that I do now. But at the moment, it was, like I said, quite the roller coaster ride. I don't complain about it. It's a good problem to have had. But there is value in coming up the ranks, so to speak,
Sure.
and learning your lumps, making your mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes in front of people I shouldn't have been making, big name people, that mistakes I should have been making in front of early on in my career when it didn't matter. So what are you going to do? That's what the universe gave me. And I'm thankful.
Well, and it sounds like the universe gave it to you almost because you're now giving it back in the form of teaching and at the Playhouse West. Let's talk about that. That's a good transition. Sure. So you're now teaching acting and
yes.
And you're the is it the creative director, or the artistic director at Playhouse West? Is that right?
Yes. And it's kind of funny. It's like someone who started acting, never acting, is now teaching acting. And, somebody might bring that up, but I'm like, yeah, that was 30 years ago. I mean, I've kind of gone through a whole journey now. I started at Playhouse West as a student because I was at that place in my career, like, there's something missing, I've had really good teachers, but there's something about my functioning that is off. And I kind of came across the Meisner technique through my investigations, through my research. And immediate was like, that's what I need. That's what I need. And so started studying there and studied under Bob Carnegie, who was one of the founders there. And, very quickly understood the bad habits that I had developed. And the funny story I tell, it's like I was in his class and he would stop me and he'd go, what in the world are you doing? And I go, I'm acting. He goes, well, please stop it. Just stop. And it took me a while to kind of shed this concept of performance, and more importantly, how to inherit a role so I can really just work out of myself. And I really kind of understanding why and really refining that love for the craft at Playhouse West to the point, like, they were like, I was there for 4 or 5 years. Like, this guy's not going anywhere. Maybe he should teach. And so, Mr. Carnegie asked me if I would like to start subbing and, sitting with him and watching him, teach on a regular basis. And, which was, quite the honor. And then, one day I got a call from him that the director at the school, Tony Savant, was actually moving to Philly to start Playhouse West Philly. And he asked me if I would like to take over his position, which again was like a shot out of the cannon, because I think I had one class and subbing class, and suddenly I had a class, a workload of 10 classes and basically running the curriculum at the school, which again, now I'm playing catch up again, and went through that huge learning curve as a teacher, to take on his class and to really, learning how to monitor and to shepherd people along through the beginning level, intermediate level, and advanced level through the Meisner technique. So that now, it's 12 years later, it is something that, again, I'm very proud of the work that I do. I'm constantly keeping the students on stage working with plays, with different workshops that we do, and have a really solid community of current actors and alumni who are always, wanting. In fact, I'm going to start now an alumni one-act production group, just because so many of the alumni just want to keep busy. So I've been very fortunate, in those opportunities that have forced me to kind of step up.
Yeah. Yeah, because you say playing catch up. What I hear is seizing the moment. It just sounds like, obviously I understand what you're saying with the catch up piece, but there's also this: you have to step up and just seize the moment. And perfection is something you look at later. It's like, I got the opportunity. I'm getting in that bat. Let's go. And I think that's amazing. Not just with A Few Good Men and the following, roles that you portray, but then with teaching, sure. It's like, what? Perfection will come later. I'm getting an op. Let's take it. Let's go.
Let's go. Exactly. And, whether it was, like, say, Rob Reiner or, Mr. Carnegie, allowing me that space to, make my mistakes and to grow and to learn. I have such a great opportunity there at Playhouse West, because the Magnolia Theater, because we have two different locations there, and I'm kind of more responsible of Magnolia. And it's kind of like my little laboratory that, I can really kind of build out and really kind of raise the brand in Hollywood in terms of the productions that we put up there, the word of mouth that's starting to spread about the level of work that we're doing. We did a play. I directed a play last year, Men in Suits, and one of the actors won Best Featured Performance for Stage Raw magazine, which is a prominent, theater magazine. And the amazing thing is, he was up against, all the other actors in town at the Amundsen, the Geffen, Mark Taper. So it wasn't like he was just up against sort of black box theater competition. So it's something we're really proud of, because we now are starting to get a lot of repeat, people coming. So every time, I've heard people, every time I see your theater putting up something, I go, because I know it's going to be quality work. So we're really excited about, the future and trying to, grow upon that.
That's incredible. Yeah. Last subject. So I know so you mentioned earlier that your original ambition before you started working with Rob, you said you were his gardener and all the different things you had done.
Well, that's how the story has evolved. Right. I was
okay.
Right.
Okay.
Right. No, I mean, the number of jobs that I was like, how I got that job. It's kind of funny. Yeah.
That's hysterical.
Yeah.
So, but your ambition was writing and directing. And one thing I came across is you've not only written and directed, but you have, I think, 4 short films that have won awards. Simone, yes. Broken, Sarah's Wish, and The Long Wait. Let's talk about those.
I mean, I've continued to, pursue my dream of directing film. There was that 4 or 5 year kind of stretch that I directed a bunch. And then is when I got the job as a director at Playhouse West that my sort of theater directing kind of took off. So that kind of held precedence has been the main thing for the last few years. But my desire has always been, to always incorporate, the film. And I just directed a short film, the first since maybe the last 5-6 years. It's called The Night of Hate. And it's come out of a one-act festival that I put together with my advanced students. And I'm at the point now that I'm encouraging they have to write their own material. So this one, The Night of Hate, is a story that Alicia G. and Samuel Selm wrote together. And we put it up in the festival. And it was, a big hit. And so we got to put this on film. And so we recently shot it maybe 2 months ago. And so now it's, being edited and worked out and that kind of thing. And I saw a rough assembly and it looks great. And what was exciting for me is in my theater directing, I've developed a system of movement that when a conflict happens, I call it ebb and flow, that kind of creates a dynamic sort of experience for the audience, okay? And I've always been like, I'd love to be able to bring this, to film. And so that's what we did. And watching it, I think it's really come off well. So, there's another project that we did a year ago that we're going to shoot soon. So the next exciting thing is sort of developing, this sort of technique that I discovered in theater and kind of trying to bring that to to movie making. So it's always evolving.
That's awesome. And you said you have a newer project in the works as well. So you said Night of Hate, and is this a new one that's coming out in the future?
It's a short film. Night of Hate is a short. And then there's another one called O.
Okay.
That's we're still, it's, written and we did it at the One Act Fest. And so now we're putting the production pieces together. So, just trying to, as I tell the kids, I try to keep them off the streets, try to keep myself off the streets.
A level. That's something to absolutely look forward to. And I bet working with your students on your projects has got to be thrilling as well. It
is to see them grow. And then even after working with them, see them excel, and getting opportunity and, working in the professional world. It's very rewarding.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I know you got a lot going on, and thank you so much for joining today. You were so gracious with your time, and I know everyone's going to love hearing these stories. And we have a lot of aspiring actors too that listen to this, and I know there's going to be a lot to take home from that, and a lot of the lessons that you've learned. And you get to bless your students with those every day. But man, thank you so much for coming on. This is a blast.
For sure. Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Absolutely, man. I hope you have a great weekend.
Thanks, man. You too.
The Movie Wars.